I sat in my study, absently running my fingers over the smooth wooden edges of a photo frame. Inside it, frozen in time, was a little girl with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile, perched on my shoulders, her tiny hands gripping my head as if she owned the world. My daughter. My first and only daughter. Outside, the house buzzed with the excitement of an upcoming wedding. Laughter drifted in from the living room where my wife, my daughter, and her bridesmaids were making last-minute adjustments to decorations and dresses. Every now and then, I'd hear my daughter's voice, soft, joyful, full of anticipation for the life she was about to begin. I should have been overjoyed. Instead, a single phrase looped in my head, eating away at my insides like a slow-acting poison. My second father. She had said it so casually. We had been in the kitchen earlier that afternoon, just the two of us. I had asked if she was nervous, if she needed anything, and she had smiled, squeezing my hand. Of course not, she had said. I've had the best role models, Mom, my second father, and now fiancé's name. At first, I hadn't even processed it. But then, like a delayed stab wound, it hit. My second father. I had laughed it off at the moment, assuming she had simply misspoken. Second, I had said, eyebrows raised, waiting for her to correct herself. But she hadn't. She had just smiled. You know what I mean, she had said, brushing past me, moving on to something else as if she hadn't just dropped a bomb on my entire existence. Now, alone in my study, I felt an unfamiliar weight settle over my chest. I had been there for every scraped knee, every school play, every heartbreak. I had taught her to ride a bike, had cheered her on when she got into college, had worked extra shifts to afford that ridiculous first car she swore she needed. And yet, somewhere along the way, I had become secondary? I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe she just meant I was her second biggest influence after her mother? Or perhaps it was some modern phrasing I wasn't familiar with, some casual way of saying another father figure in my life. Or maybe it was something else. The thought twisted in my stomach, an ugly thing I didn't want to name. Was I even her real father? The idea was absurd, ludicrous. And yet, once planted, it refused to leave. The laughter from the living room suddenly grated on my nerves. I stepped out of my study, moving toward the noise. My wife was in the center of it all, draping a sash over our daughter's shoulders, fussing over her hair. She looked up and caught my eye. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice light, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just thinking about how fast time flies." She smiled back, a soft, knowing look. "I know, but look at her. She's happy." I looked at my daughter, my second father's daughter, and I swallowed back the bile rising in my throat. I had been so sure of my place in her life. But now, doubt gnawed at me like an animal picking apart a carcass. I needed to know the truth. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind circling the same thought like a predator stalking its prey. My second father. It echoed in my head, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just a careless turn of phrase. But it felt like something more. Like an answer to a question I hadn't even known I needed to ask. Beside me, my wife shifted, sensing my tension. "You're quiet," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. I hesitated. "Did you hear what she said earlier?" She sighed softly, rolling onto her side to face me. Even in the dim glow of the bedside lamp, I could see the patience in her eyes, the gentle weariness of someone who had already decided this was not a big deal. I heard. "And..." She reached for my hand, squeezing it lightly. "You're overthinking this." I let out a humorless chuckle. "Am I?" She didn't mean anything by it, she said, her voice soothing, like she was talking to a child afraid of the dark. "You've been her father her whole life." Maybe she meant stepfather in the symbolic sense, like you chose to be her dad, even though you didn't have to. I flinched. Even though I didn't have to? The words sat in my chest like lead. "Come on," she continued, rubbing small circles on my palm. "She loves you. Don't let this ruin such a happy time." I didn't answer, because the more I thought about it, the less happy I felt. She let out a small sigh, kissed my knuckles, and turned away, ready to drift back into sleep. But I lay there, my thoughts tangled in a web I couldn't escape. Was I really overthinking this? Or had I just ignored the signs for too long? I thought back, digging through the years, combing through memories that had once felt solid, unshakable. But now, I started to see the cracks. Had she always been this distant? There were moments, small, almost imperceptible ones, that I had never questioned before. Like how she never really asked me for advice the way other daughters did with their fathers. She always went to her mother first. Or how, when she was younger, she had clung to me desperately like I was her whole world. But then, somewhere along the way, that closeness had thinned. Like she had figured something out and quietly pulled away. Had I missed something? Had I been too blinded by love to see the truth? I remembered her high school graduation. The way she had hugged me, stiff and careful, but had collapsed into her mother's arms, whispering something I hadn't been able to hear. I thought about birthdays. How she always thanked me for the gifts, but never really seemed as excited about them as the ones from her mom. And then, an even uglier thought. Had she known all along? Had she spent her whole life looking at me, smiling, laughing, calling me Dad, while secretly knowing the truth? I felt sick. Slowly, I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and sat up, gripping my forehead. My pulse pounded in my ears. There was a truth buried in my own house. A truth I had never questioned. But now? No, I had to know. The next morning, I woke up with one thought burning in my mind. I need answers. I couldn't ignore this anymore. Not after the way it had burrowed into my brain, keeping me awake all night. I needed to know why she had called me her second father. Needed to know if the doubt eating at me was real or just my own paranoia twisting something innocent into something ugly. But I couldn't just ask her. No, if this was what I feared it was, then she had been keeping something from me for years. Confronting her directly would only give her a chance to lie, to sugarcoat the truth, to tell me exactly what I wanted to hear. No, if I wanted the truth, I had to go looking for it myself. The first opportunity came that afternoon when her fiancé, Jason, stopped by the house to go over last-minute wedding details. A good kid, polite, well-mannered, a little awkward. The kind of guy who still called me sir even after I told him not to. I kept it casual, waiting until we were alone in the living room before easing into it. So, I said, pouring us both a drink, "You excited?" Of course, he grinned. Nervous as hell, though. I chuckled, nodding. That's normal. Marriage is a big step. He took a sip of his beer, shifting on the couch. Yeah, but I know I'm marrying the right person. She's incredible. I smiled, but my stomach twisted. She is, I said, swirling the drink in my hand. Then, feigning casual curiosity, I asked, "Hey." I was thinking about something she said the other day. She called me her second father. Jason's fingers tightened around his glass. There it was. That flicker. That barely perceptible hesitation before he forced a small chuckle and shrugged. Oh, yeah, she probably just meant, like, a second role model, you know? His voice was too light, too rehearsed. I stared at him, reading the tension in his posture, the way his knee bounced slightly, the way he suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. Right, I said, pretending to let it go. Just struck me as an odd way to put it. Jason let out a nervous laugh, then quickly changed the subject. A few hours later, I found another opportunity. My daughter's childhood best friend, Emily, had stopped by to help with wedding plans. I had known Emily since she was a little girl, practically a second daughter to us at one point. I caught her alone in the kitchen while she was grabbing a snack. "You excited for the wedding?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She smiled. "Of course. It's crazy. It feels like just yesterday we were in high school, sneaking out to—" She cut herself off, laughing. "Never mind." I smirked. "Yeah, don't incriminate yourself now." She giggled, opening a bag of chips. I let a pause stretch between us before I spoke again. "Hey, can I ask you something?" "Sure," she said through a mouthful of chips. "I was talking to my daughter the other day, and she called me her second father." I kept my gaze steady. "You ever hear her say that before?" Emily froze mid-chew. It was subtle, but I caught it. The slight widening of her eyes, the way she swallowed too quickly and coughed a little. "Oh, She grabbed a bottle of water from the counter, taking a long sip, buying herself time. I guess? Maybe. She wasn't looking at me now. She ever mention why? I pressed. Emily's fingers twitched around the bottle. She shook her head quickly, too quickly. "I don't know. You know how she is. She says things weird sometimes." She let out a forced laugh. "I wouldn't read too much into it. There it is again. That same unease." That same pause. She was lying. She knew something. Before I could press further, my wife called her from the other room, and she bolted like a scared rabbit. The final confirmation came later that evening. An old aunt had arrived early for the wedding, an elderly woman who had always been a little too free with her opinions. The kind of person who didn't know how to keep a secret even if you paid her. I sat with her for a while, pretending to make idle conversation, waiting for the right moment. And then I asked, "Did you ever hear my daughter call me her second father?" She tensed. Just for a second. But that was all it took. She cleared her throat, shifting in her seat. "Oh, well, you know how young people talk these days. Always saying things that don't mean anything." I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. "Come on, you know something, don't you?" She paled. I, of course not. Her eyes flicked toward my wife, as if checking to see if she was listening. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. They all knew. Every single one of them. Her fiancé. Her best friend. A distant relative who barely visited. They all knew something about my own daughter that I didn't. And none of them wanted to tell me. Fear slithered down my spine, cold and suffocating. What the hell was I about to find? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, Jason's forced chuckle, Emily's nervous fidgeting, my aunt's fleeting glance toward my wife. A web of unspoken words surrounded me, a truth everyone but me seemed to know. By morning, my stomach was in knots. I had spent my whole life believing my daughter was mine. But what if I had been living a lie? I needed proof. So while the house bustled with pre-wedding chaos, I locked myself in my study and started digging. I went through everything: old photo albums, report cards, medical records. I scoured every birthday card, every letter, every scrap of paper from her childhood, looking for something, anything, that would tell me what I already feared. And then I found it. An old shoebox buried in the back of my desk drawer. It was filled with keepsakes, childhood drawings, crumpled notes from when she was a kid, little mementos I had saved over the years. And at the very bottom, beneath years of memories, was a letter, a sealed envelope, slightly yellowed with age. My breath caught in my throat as I read the front. To the man who raised me. Not dad. Not father. The man who raised me. My hands shook as I picked it up. The handwriting was hers, messy, uneven, from when she was younger. But she had never given it to me. Never told me it existed. Why? My chest tightened. A part of me didn't want to open it. Didn't want to know. But I had come too far to stop now. I carefully tore the envelope open, unfolded the letter, and began to read. Dear. She had started to write Dad, but had crossed it out. I don't know if I'll ever give you this. Maybe I won't. But I need to write it anyway. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep going. You always say I'm your greatest gift, that you're lucky to have me. But I've always wondered, if you knew the truth, would you still feel that way? I gripped the paper tighter. I didn't find out until last year. I wasn't even looking for anything, I swear. It was just an accident. A stupid mistake. I was helping Mom clean out the attic, and I found an old file with my birth certificate in it. I stopped breathing. I saw the name. It wasn't yours. My vision blurred. I don't know why Mom never told me. I don't know why you never did. Maybe you both thought it was better this way. Maybe it was better. Because I don't want to think of you as anything less than my father. You are. No matter what the papers say. No matter whose blood is in my veins. I had to put the letter down for a second. My hands were shaking too much. The room felt smaller, like the walls were pressing in on me. She knew. She had known for years. She had spent all this time looking me in the eyes, smiling, calling me Dad, all while knowing the truth. And she had chosen not to tell me. I forced myself to finish the letter. I don't know if I'll ever be brave enough to talk about it. Maybe one day. But until then, just know. I love you. Even if you're not my real father, you're still my dad. You always will be. My chest ached. I sat there, staring at the letter, my whole world unraveling in my hands. I was not her father. Not by blood. Not on paper. Just the man who raised her. And now, I had to decide what to do with that. I read the letter again. And then again. Each time, the words blurred a little more, their meaning unraveling and reforming in ways I couldn't grasp. My fingers clenched the edges of the paper, but my mind refused to hold on to anything except one sentence. I will never forget the day I found out. The day she found out. The words throbbed in my skull like a warning bell. What exactly had she found out? My name wasn't on her birth certificate. I had already braced myself for that truth. But this meant there was something else. Something bigger. I read the rest of the letter, desperately searching for another clue, a context that would soften the edges of those words. But there was nothing. She had written pages about how much she loved me, how grateful she was that I raised her, how she didn't care about blood. But that one line changed everything. It wasn't just the discovery that I wasn't her biological father. That alone wouldn't have made her right. I will never forget the day I found out. That sounded like something worse, something that had shaken her. And now it was shaking me, too. My hands felt numb as I carefully folded the letter, placing it back into the envelope like it was some kind of fragile artifact. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, my heartbeat a dull, heavy thud in my ears. Had my wife known? Of course she had. Had everyone known? That would explain the strange looks, the hesitant pauses, the way Jason, Emily, even my own family had acted when I brought it up. My daughter had been carrying this knowledge for years, silently, privately. I tried to imagine her at 16, standing in the attic, staring at that birth certificate. I pictured the moment it hit her, the moment she realized her father was someone else. Had she cried? Had she felt betrayed? Or had she always suspected? I wanted to ask her, wanted to demand answers. But what if the truth was worse than I could handle? What if, in trying to uncover this mystery, I shattered what little I had left? I exhaled shakily, pressing the heels of my hands into my eyes. No, not yet. I needed more. I needed to know before I acted. Because if there was more to this story, if there was something my wife had hidden from me all these years, then I wasn't going to let it blindside me the way it had blindsided my daughter. I had spent my life protecting her, and I wasn't stopping now. I couldn't stop. The moment I read that sentence, I will never forget the day I found out. Something inside me snapped. There was no turning back now. I had spent my whole life believing in a truth that might have never existed. I needed proof. Cold, undeniable proof. I waited until the house was empty. My wife and daughter were out making final wedding preparations, laughter and excitement still lingering in the air from their departure. But I wasn't laughing. I wasn't excited. I was a man on a mission. I went straight to the filing cabinet in our bedroom, the place where we kept every important document, tax returns, insurance policies, mortgage papers, and birth certificates. I rifled through the folders, my pulse hammering in my ears. My fingers were clumsy, shaking, as I flipped through years of paperwork. Finally, I found it. A thin manila folder labeled with her name. I pulled it out, my breath catching in my throat as I opened it. And there it was. Her birth certificate. But my name wasn't on it. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I stared at the paper, my vision swimming. I scanned it once, twice, 3 times, hoping, praying that I had somehow missed it. But it wasn't there. In the spot where my name should have been, there was another man's name. A name I didn't recognize. I gripped the document so tightly. My stomach churned, a sickening mixture of disbelief and fury twisting inside me. Who the hell is this man? I flipped through the rest of the folder, searching for something, anything, that could explain this. Hospital records. Adoption papers. A lie I could cling to. But there was nothing. Nothing except the cold, undeniable truth staring back at me. I wasn't just not her biological father. I had never been her legal father, either. And that meant my wife had known. Not just known, but deliberately kept it from me. My hands clenched around the paper as a wave of rage crashed over me. Years of memories flooded my mind, the late nights rocking her to sleep, the skinned knees I had bandaged, the tears I had wiped away, the birthday parties, the school dances, the proud moments where I stood by her side thinking she was mine. Had it all been a lie? Had I been nothing more than a placeholder? I thought of my daughter, 16 years old, standing in that attic, staring at this same paper, feeling her world crack open the same way mine was now. She had known. She had known for years. And yet, she had never told me. Neither had my wife. Neither had anyone. I set the birth certificate down, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. My hands felt foreign, my body numb. I wasn't just some man who raised her. I was a stranger in my own family, and I had no idea what to do next. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the birth certificate. The name burned into my brain. I wanted to scream, to break something, to march out of the house, find my wife, and demand an explanation. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because the moment I opened my mouth, I wasn't just demanding answers, I was changing everything. And my daughter. She had never told me. She had known for years. And she had kept it to herself. That meant something. I ran a hand over my face, my breath coming in short, controlled bursts. My heart hammered in my chest, a relentless, angry drumbeat that screamed at me to do something. But what? If I confronted my wife, she would have an answer ready. A carefully constructed lie, or worse, the truth I wasn't ready to hear. If I confronted my daughter, what would I even say? Why didn't you tell me? I already knew the answer to that. Because she chose not to. Because, despite everything, despite that name on the paper, despite knowing, she still called me Dad. That had to mean something, didn't it? I stood up suddenly, shoving the birth certificate back into the folder. My hands were shaking, my pulse roaring in my ears. I had two choices. I could destroy everything right now, blow up my family, my marriage, my daughter's wedding, demanding answers to a question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. Or I could wait, swallow the rage, bury the betrayal, walk back into that wedding like nothing had changed. I closed my eyes, exhaling shakily. My entire world had shifted. But she, my daughter, was still here, still smiling, still excited for the life ahead of her. If she never told me, maybe she never wanted me to know. And maybe that was my answer. I clenched my jaw, forcing my breath to steady. For now, I would say nothing. But that didn't mean I was done searching. The days blurred together. The wedding loomed closer, and the house swelled with excitement. Guests arriving, flowers being arranged, dresses and suits being fitted. Everywhere I turned, there was laughter, chatter, movement. But I felt like a ghost. I watched from the edges as my daughter floated through it all, radiant, beaming, surrounded by people who belonged to this moment in a way I suddenly didn't. And she never once turned to me. Not for advice. Not for help. Not the way a daughter should lean on her father before one of the biggest days of her life. It was little things at first. The way she looped her arm through her fiancé's when decisions needed to be made. The way she sought out her mother for reassurance, her bridesmaids for laughter, her friends for comfort. And then the bigger things. The wedding planning meetings I hadn't been invited to. The seating chart that placed me next to distant relatives while her mother sat with her closest family. The moment she told Jason's father, "I can't wait to have you as my second dad." And I realized she had never once said that to me. Each instance was another crack, a new wound. I was still here, still standing in the middle of it all, but somehow I had already been erased. And the silence between us stretched. I wanted to tell myself I was imagining it, that the distance wasn't intentional. But I knew better now, because I had seen the birth certificate, because I had read the letter, because she knew. And maybe, deep down, I had always known too. At night, I lay awake next to my wife, listening to her steady breathing, staring at the ceiling. My mind reeled, over and over, the same relentless loop. Say something. Ask her. Demand the truth. But I never did. Because if I did, I wasn't just questioning her. I was questioning everything. Who I had been to her. Who I had been to myself. And if I had to ask, if I had to beg for my place in her life, then maybe I had already lost it. So I stayed silent. I played my role. The dutiful father. The proud, supportive parent standing on the sidelines, smiling through the pain, through the growing, unbearable distance. But inside, I was unraveling. And with every passing day, I felt more and more like a man preparing to walk his daughter down the aisle, only to hand her off to a family where he never truly belonged. The morning of the wedding felt surreal, like I was floating through someone else's life. The house was alive with energy, people rushing in and out, final details being perfected, laughter echoing down the halls. My daughter was upstairs, getting ready. Guests were arriving. The ceremony was just hours away, and I was standing in the middle of it all, feeling like a man attending his own funeral. I had spent weeks convincing myself to let this go, to swallow my pride, my pain, my doubts, and just be the father she had always known, even if she had never truly been mine. I had told myself that it didn't matter, that DNA didn't change the memories, the love, the sacrifices, that I was still her dad, even if my name wasn't on some piece of paper. And maybe If the day had gone quietly, if nothing had disrupted the delicate balance I had forced myself to accept, maybe I could have lived with that. But then I heard it. A casual voice in passing. An old family friend chatting with a distant cousin near the entrance of the venue. It's so wonderful that her real father could make it. I froze. The world tilted. For a moment, I wasn't even sure I had heard it correctly. Her real father. The word sliced through me, sharper than any blade. I turned slowly, my pulse pounding in my ears. The woman who had spoken wasn't even looking at me. She had no idea she had just shattered the last piece of my sanity with a few offhand words. Yeah, the cousin murmured. I was surprised, too. I didn't think he'd show up after all these years. I couldn't breathe. He was here. The man whose name was on that birth certificate. The man my daughter had known about for years. The man I had never even been told existed. And she had invited him. She had wanted him here. A hot, sickening wave of betrayal washed over me. I had spent the past few weeks telling myself that even if I wasn't her biological father, I was still something to her. That she had chosen me. That, despite everything, I mattered. But now, on the most important day of her life, she had brought him. And I had been left in the dark. My fists clenched at my sides. I needed to see him. I needed to know who he was, to put a face to the ghost that had haunted my life without me even realizing it. But more than that, I needed to decide, right now, exactly what kind of man I was going to be today. The ceremony began, and I stood off to the side, my heart hammering with each slow beat. I felt eyes on me, whispers drifting around the room, but my focus was entirely on her. My daughter stood at the altar, stunning in white, radiant and unaware of the turmoil raging just beneath the surface of this perfect day. Beside her, Jason smiled, his eyes filled with adoration. Across the aisle, seated discreetly but visibly, was a man I'd never seen before, her biological father. He watched her quietly, his expression impossible to read, though his presence was a silent confirmation of everything I'd feared. I could have stopped the wedding. I could have stood up, shouted, demanded answers right then and there. It would have been justified, maybe even satisfying, to rip away the delicate veil of secrecy everyone had carefully maintained around me. But I didn't, because, in that moment, looking at her standing there, I realized something that twisted painfully inside my chest. She didn't owe me an explanation. She didn't owe me blood ties or paperwork. She'd given me something else, something far more fragile and valuable, her trust, her love. Even if she never fully told me the truth, the reality was that she'd chosen me, every day of her life, as the father she wanted. And now, in this fragile moment, she needed me to choose her, too, one more time. My decision was made. The officiant spoke gently, guiding the ceremony forward. The guests watched, smiling, oblivious to the silent war raging within me. Then came the pause, the moment before the vows, the quiet breath that hung between two lifetimes. And that's when I moved. All eyes turned toward me as I slowly stepped forward, a small, wrapped box in my trembling hands. My daughter's eyes widened, confusion flickering briefly behind her carefully arranged smile. Jason shifted nervously, glancing at her, then at me, uncertain of what was happening. My heart thundered in my chest as I stood before her, 1,000 emotions swirling in the silence between us. She watched me carefully, her breath shallow with a hint of fear, as if she sensed something significant was about to unfold. But I simply extended the small package toward her, my voice steady but raw. I know we already exchanged gifts, I said quietly, my voice breaking slightly under the weight of everything left unsaid. But I had one more. She hesitated, then carefully took the box from my hands. Her fingers trembled as she looked down, then back up at me, uncertainty shining in her eyes. Go ahead, I whispered, nodding gently. Slowly, carefully, she began to unwrap it, the paper crackling loudly in the tense silence. Every breath in the room stilled, all eyes locked on this fragile, dangerous moment. My daughter's hands shook slightly as she opened the lid. She stared down at what lay inside, her eyes instantly welling with tears, a tiny gasp escaping her lips. It wasn't anger or fear. It was pure, stunned disbelief. The room was deathly silent, holding its breath. "What?" she breathed softly, lifting her eyes back up to mine, searching desperately for answers. But I said nothing. Not yet. Because inside that box was more than just a gift. It was a statement, a decision, and the final word in a story she thought she'd already written. My daughter stood frozen, staring down at the small, framed photograph cradled in her hands. It was an old, faded snapshot, her as a tiny child, laughing in my arms, her eyes bright with pure joy and trust, a trust that had been the bedrock of our entire relationship. Tucked gently beneath the picture was a small, folded note. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, unfolding it slowly, as though she knew the words inside had the power to change everything. "You are my first daughter, always." Her breath caught audibly, breaking the silence that had blanketed the room. Tears spilled down her cheeks, unchecked, as the enormity of what I had done finally struck her. The room watched, spellbound, feeling something shift but unable to fully understand what it was. Across the aisle, her biological father sat rigidly, eyes wide in sudden, quiet understanding. He, too, had been prepared for confrontation, for chaos, but this gentle reclaiming of what was mine, was something he hadn't anticipated. But this moment wasn't for him. It wasn't even for me. It was for her. It was a reminder that whatever truths lay hidden, whatever secrets had silently separated us, none of it could rewrite the years we had shared or the bond we had painstakingly built. I saw it in her eyes, the recognition, the gratitude, and finally, relief. It was as if a great weight she'd been carrying for years had suddenly lifted. Without a word, she stepped forward, closing the small distance between us. The next instant, she was in my arms, holding me tighter than she ever had before. Her shoulders shook softly as she buried her face into my shoulder, her voice barely audible but crystal clear. "I didn't mean second in importance," she whispered, her voice breaking, thick with emotion. "I meant second because you chose to be my father." Her words crashed over me, knocking loose the pain and uncertainty I'd been holding for so long. The tension drained from my body, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace. She had known. She had always known. But she'd never seen me as anything less than her father, because I'd always chosen to be exactly that. "I love you," she breathed, holding on to me fiercely. "I love you too," I whispered back, the words catching painfully in my throat, but finally coming free. Around us, the silence transformed into gentle murmurs, sighs of understanding, tears quietly shed. No one asked questions. No one dared break the spell. The wedding resumed softly, gracefully, but something fundamental had changed, something deeper and far more powerful than a birth certificate or biology ever could. Later, as the evening unfolded, I caught her eyes from across the reception hall. We exchanged silent smiles, the kind filled with gratitude and quiet, shared understanding. We didn't need to speak it aloud. Not now, perhaps not ever. The truth, the secret we both carried, remained partially buried, left deliberately unspoken. But that was okay, because in the end, the truth wasn't nearly as important as what we both chose to believe. And she had chosen me. The rest could remain exactly as it was, half hidden, half known, beautifully unresolved. Exactly as family secrets often are.